It's time for another Dice Tower review with Robert Geistlinger.
A park filled with ancient statues and deities, and we're going to make offerings to them and try to summon an ogre to worship flesh? Well, let's see how it plays. Today we're taking a look at Bomarzo. So here we're taking a look at Bomarzo. This is a 2 to 4 player worker placement game where players are going to be going through a park here and they're going to be making offerings to various deities. Now there is some historical background to this game in terms of this park that you can take a look for yourself. The game itself is played over 8 rounds, with each round advancing this marker here by 1, and each player taking turns until they've used up all of their worker pawns for that round. The game has 3 primary resources, being food, coins, and wine. In addition, you're going to have your own player board where it's going to track the progress of your particular fiefdom. So here we have a track that will allow us to gain additional workers. This will allow us to gain additional food income, coin income, wine income, and card income. You're going to be building out development cards, and those have 2 different sides to them. The first level advancement is when you first build it, and when you go to upgrade it, you will flip it over to the other side, gaining its effect. And I'll cover those in a little more detail in a minute. At the start of each round, the first thing that's going to happen is each player is going to gain their income. Now what you see in front of you is a game that's already in progress. I chose to take it to its very end and show it here so you could see what a game board would look like after the players have completed a game. In the case of this, if we were doing an income, the green player here would receive 1 food, 1 coin, 1 wine, and 1 card, taking it to their player board. The red player over here, however, would actually get 3 food because this is a double food and this is a food, and both have been activated, 1 coin, 1 wine, and no cards. Now, in addition, each player already has some of these out, so this player would actually get an additional wine as part of their income, and this player would actually gain an additional coin as part of theirs. After this, the first player is going to take an action. The actions that you can take are either going to be these spots here, or it's going to be on the deity cards themselves. Now, a player can only place 1 of their workers on a particular spot unless they have a development card that breaks that rule. The 3 primary fields here we have. The first one, the green player could get 2 wine. If he went here, he would gain 3 food, and here would be 3 coins. The second player that chose to go there would get 1 less than what is printed there, and then anyone else going to these would only receive 1. The deity cards are going to allow you to spend resources to take an action associated with that deity. Now you'll notice sitting out here right now, I have some that are on this yellowish side and some that are on the silver side. That is because from a previous round, some of these went unused. And I'll explain that when we get to the final phase of a round. So if green goes here, they would get to pay a food and 2 coins, and that will allow them to build or upgrade a development card that has this book symbol. The cards have symbols in the corner of them. So let's say that we had this and we would spend out the 1 food, the 2 coins, and we could choose to flip over this card. In doing so, a couple things are going to happen. First, anything in these corners we're going to gain on these field tracks here. So this would say that we get to move up 1 on this little scroll track, and we get to move up 2 here on this pillar track, of which we're already far up, but we'll move it back and say we moved up 2. Now you gain that benefit when you build it and when you flip it, so you don't negate what you already did. So if we had built the card for the first time, we've only got 1 on the pillar track. When we upgraded it, however, we got what we just showed. In addition, once it's now built into the second level advancement, we now gain its ongoing benefit. Other cards that we have are this one here, which allows us to do the same, but we're building ones with this little head icon. This one, which allows us to take one resource cube from every divinity card out, or we can choose to take all of the cubes from one card. Now that's significant when I explain how a person repeats an action. This one over here allows us to build ones with cards with the house symbol. This one over here allows us to advance our tracks here. We can do that either by moving 1 up 2 spaces or by moving 2 1 space. The next card over here is Drago, and that allows us to take a card from our hand and place it underneath one of these with the first development side face up, because there will be a divinity score on it. And I'll explain when we get to the end why that is significant. We have Genio here, who allows us to spend a coin and draw 2 cards to our hand. And then we have Tartaruga, which allows us to discard a card from our hand or 2 cards from our hand to move up one of these 3 tracks. Now, I mentioned earlier it was significant putting these cubes on this card. That is because if another player wishes to go there, they have to up the ante, so to speak. They will need to spend the exact cubes that are on the card plus 1 additional cube of another type. So in this case, the red player going here, they would need to have a food, 2 coins, and then something else. Well, let's say that something else was wine. Now they would get to take the action. This is important again because now if a third player wishes to go there, they must replicate all of the cubes on the card plus an additional resource. Now wine is considered wild, so they can replace that in their offering with something else. However, it's important to note that once a card has 2 wine cubes on it, that is now officially blocked for the remainder of that round. Another important point here, and I'm going to actually pull back what red did to show you this working in a different fashion. If instead of wishing to do it on their next turn, when green took the action, if they had had 2 wine in their position, they could immediately choose to copy the action. And in doing so, you need to spend 2 wine plus the same resources that the active player played. However, those do not go to the card. Instead, they go back to the pool. So if red had wished to take that action without, when green did, they could spend the 2 wine, the 2 coin, and the 1 food, and take the same action without using one of their pawns. Now you may have noticed here that green has an additional pawn more than that. That is because during the course of this game, green had moved their track up here, which will allow you to gain up to an additional 2 pawns that will give you more actions during a round. Some of the cards out here also have special effects, such as this one here, that allows you to exchange coin for food or food for coin. But when you do so during a round, you must kind of turn it to its side to symbolize that you used it, as it can only be used once per round. This one here allows me to go back to something I'm already on, but again, it's only used once per round. Another important note about the tracks out here is the tracks have these little victory point symbols. The first player, let's pull these off, the first player to reach one on a track does gain a victory point for doing so. And there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 possible. Another important note before I move into the next phase of the game is that when you are paying the offering, you are allowed to overpay. And this is important because it can stop your opponents from being able to buy their way in, either via the copy or by taking the action themselves later if you price them out of it, or even if you overpaid by 2 wine, effectively locking it for the rest of the round. At the end of a round, you're going to look out here at the different deities. Any deity card on its yellow side, that hasn't been used that round, meaning no pawns are on it, you're going to flip it over to the silver side. That's going to reduce the cost of that action the next round. If the green had been on here at the end of the round, any that are on the silver side that do have pawns will flip back over to their yellow side. You'll remove any cubes from the board. Players will take back their pawns. You'll reset any of these. And then you will advance the park marker to the next round. Play will continue round and round like this, with the first player marker moving to the next player until you get to the end of round 8. Now, one thing I'm going to note that I realized I didn't mention to you before I explain how the final scoring works is you may be wondering what this card is for. This card is so that during the game you can keep your hand of cards underneath it to symbolize that they are not cards that you have purchased or upgraded. At the end of the game, I mentioned earlier that there is a way to tuck these cards underneath other cards. Now they have a little number on them. You're going to reveal any of them that are underneath, and you're going to reorder the deities according to that. Now in the event of a tie, they just keep the same positioning they have. But you're going to start from here and go round and round. The deity with the most divinity points is going to go here, down, and so on and so on. That's going to cause a cascade of their point values for final scoring. Then you're going to go through and do the scoring. The corner symbols show what is scoring for that particular. So this one here, we're going to be scoring based on who has the most book symbols in their upgraded advancements. So in this case here, we have 1, 2, and then a half. And the other player has 1.5. So green would win this particular one and get 3 points. In a 3 and 4 player game, there will be a second place. You're going to score for the most books, for the most of the little culture head thing. Whoever has the most food still in their possession. Whoever has the most of these with the little house symbol. Whoever is highest on this track. Whoever has the most coins in their possession, whoever's highest on this track, and whoever is highest on this track. You're going to track those victory points at the end down here with this row. Then after that, you're going to look at your non-upgraded cards, and on these cards, there's a little symbol on them. If you have at least 3 unique symbols, then you are going to receive an additional victory point. If you have 4 unique symbols, such as our player here, then you are going to gain 2 victory points, and if you have 5 different symbols, you are going to gain 4 victory points. Tally up the score, and whoever has the most points is the winner. So let's look at Bomarzo. Now the first thing I'm going to do before I jump into this review is I'm going to read you the opening of the rulebook. All those who travel the world in quest of huge and wonderful splendors come here to see gruesome faces, elephants, lions, ogres, and dragons. Okay, well that describes some of the statues in this park. So reads the novice to the unwary visitor who ventures into the sacred grove of Bomarzo. In the park's caverns, otherworldly forces lurk and plot. Its creatures, who were once flesh but are now stone, absorb the mystical energies of conjurers, waiting for the day to return to life. The time is nearly ripe. The ogre's worshippers gather in dark sanctuaries, while the ogre awaits his imminent reawakening and his horrifying banquet of human flesh. Okay, so that's quite a heavy opening to a Euro game. Does the game deliver on that? Well, absolutely not. This game is a worker placement economic game, with the fact that you're making offerings to deities very much secondary in what you're doing, other than it's what you're doing. But in reality, this is an economic game where you're building your fiefdom. So honestly, don't deliver to me a promise of ogres eating human flesh and then give me a dry economic game. With that said, I did enjoy the gameplay of this. I enjoyed the way you can put your offerings onto these deities, and you can choose to overpay. And in fact, it's something people overlook the first couple times they play it that you really need to be aware of. The fact that I could pay the minimum, and now my next opponent can pay about the same as me plus 1, or I could overpay and make them pay more if they really want this action. In effect, I could also play 2-1 and lock everyone out of it. So I really did enjoy that. I also enjoyed the advancements themselves, and I love the risk reward that goes into them. I could play them to their level 1, and that's going to allow me to get those bonus points at the end of the game, which don't be off put by that. That set collection at the end of the game is really worth a lot of points. But I could flip them over, and now I get benefits now that I can use now. So I really did enjoy how that works out in the game itself. I did enjoy the putting cards underneath the cards to reorder the point values of the particular deities at the end of the game, but I found that new players really just kind of ignored that, so we really ended up a lot of the first few games with the point values coming in their initial order. So that can be a little off the first couple times you play. The game is 2 to 4 players. I do think that 3 players is probably the sweet spot for time versus gameplay. The game does play well at 4. The 2-player version of the game to me was it was okay, but I don't know that I would personally play it again that way. The points are a little different, and honestly, the interaction between players really just doesn't manifest itself. I did have a few technical issues with the game. The first being, as you saw in the overview, the food cubes are yellow. Well, that's fine, but if you're going to make a resource cube be yellow, don't make a player color be yellow as well, because the players have 5 cubes on their boards, and those yellow cubes are the exact same as the food cubes. I saw in some earlier prototypes that there was a blue player in the game, and there wasn't here, and I'm not sure why yellow was chosen over the blue, because visually, it was a little confusing for me. Overall, this is not a great game. It's dry, and the theme really doesn't come through. But it's not a bad game either, because as a dry economic worker placement game, it's enjoyable, and it has just enough risk reward, and really, it's really confrontational a lot of times that you don't find in a lot of Euro-style games. I personally am going to keep this game in my collection, but I'm not sure that this game is going to be for everyone. The box cover is a little scary, and it doesn't really display to you what's in the box as far as the gameplay. It's one of the statues. I hope that you've enjoyed this look at Bomarzo, and it's given you an idea of whether or not the game may or may not be right for you and your group. It is a game that I would recommend at least playing if you're given the chance to play it. Maybe it's a buy if you catch it on sale, or if you really do enjoy the theme of this game, or just like drier economic strategy games. And I look forward to seeing you folks next time.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.